All right. Hello again. So we went over, or I went over the grid kind of pattern, or you can use tracing paper if you have a photograph or something. But undoubtedly, some people will want to um, kind of freehand it. And before when you do that, you want to get some images of yourself. You can use the mirror and stuff, but it can help. Look at this. To print it out and do measurements and figure out where those proportions of what the proportions of your head are, the width to height. Okay, remember the top of your head is up here, not your brow. Your eyes are typically halfway between the chin and the top of the head. And if you go online and drawing books, you'll find all kinds of proportional references to the head. That can come in handy. But look at yourself. Since it's a self-portrait, really look at yourself. And if you want to break it, you can do very analytically like this and break it down. You can choose a viewpoint and figure out where those proportions of those shapes are. You can even have, like, say this, it's kind of hard to see in here, a line that goes down here and then measure out from that line to get a good kind of like how far away from that center line the forehead, brow is to this. And you can do it like that and kind of work your way down very analytically. But it's best to get an overview of the head too before you start to go into it. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And I can think about how I want my paper orientated. Usually, I lost part of the paper. Usually, the screen is not helping me. We'll say my paper. Here, I'll just freehand this. So that's my paper. I'm going to think about where the position of that head is. Do I want it dead center like it was in there? It's kind of boring. Or do I want to do a close-up of an area? You don't have to, for your portrait, you don't have to necessarily do a whole head in there. You might also think about how you're going to skew things too. But generally, and I'm going to draw some of this out. We have like an oval-shaped thing, our heads. I'll kind of loosely, this is going to be interesting. Kind of put that in there. So again, this is where I'm cutting off my picture. Anyway, so generally you start with a line down the middle, like that as a reference. And I'm doing these lightly. And then thinking about from here to here and have a halfway point. And you can, again, lightly put it in. So even light, I'm doing it a little bit darker because, what am I going to say? Why? Because so you can see it in the video. But and then sometimes people like to put their eyes in, and you can start out by spreading out. They're usually an eye between, but you can definitely measure off of yourself, and you can see how far apart that is. And then coming down here, looking at the nose, and I could again make measurements off that image. If this is tiny, and I'm making measurements off of this with my little ruler, and that's like 3/8 of an inch, and I want it 3/4 of an inch over here. I'm blowing it up twice as big. I times by 2 and make it bigger. But anyway, or you can change the denominator. Anyway, remember math. But I'm just going to kind of a little bit look at the image. You can also look at the image. But the eyes, again, generally a space. It'll vary from person to person. Start to lay out where, so the mouth, the nose, where those areas are, just to give yourself a simple kind of thing, like where the top of the lip is, the edges of the nose. Oh, and sometimes, I got hair covering my ears. But if you do have ears, some of you might be able to see your ears. Your ears are usually kind of the big ears, brow to the. Can't see them in my picture, so I'm just kind of guessing. Ears are weird things. And then figure out where your hairline is going to be. And where, like, if you have, oh man, got heavy eyebrows. Just kind of loosely put this in, and you can go back and erase, look confused as you go along. And different types of lines of the face. And then figure out the other thing to look at. So, get a layout. I know it's really quick. Again, interesting thing here, think about how you can as an example, like we won't see, this is the square, here's my paper, and you can kind of do some little thumbnail sketches, not on your thumb, but small little sketches to kind of position what, don't forget about all the other compositional things. What kind of balance do you want to have? What would it be better to express you if you were in the middle of the page and very symmetrical, or would kind of at an angle, or what other imagery is going to be in the picture? So think about those things. What else, Joe? The other thing, once you figure that out, you get a layout and you can play with the paints, and you can look at, I know we talked about value, and you think about this with the paints, and we talked about blue and red's got a heavier, denser, or let's say darker value. So when you look at this, one way to start that out is to look at those shadows. I know I got all these lines over here, but to look at those shadows and then trace kind of where these darker shapes are lightly on your paper. So this might be the darkest, the iris there, and then this one above the brow might be a little bit, or be lighter. And then I have like these ones down here, around here, that are lighter. If you happen to have Photoshop, sometimes there's a program, so I can kind of like mark off where those shadows are. This will be a very harsh way of doing it, but it can kind of help you figure that out, because it's going to change tone there. So as you paint in, say whatever, it should be green for all I know, or blue, or orange, or think about what kind of color scheme is going to express you. Skin tone can be it's going to be a lot of, depending, you have to really look at your skin tone and do some things. So there's usually yellows and reds and blues. So you'd be amazed, but it's going to vary a lot depending on your own particular skin tone. So look at, and it's not usually, one thing about that is it's usually not one flat color. But we're not really getting into a super painting class. We're just trying to figure out the expressive qualities of paint. So you could go with doesn't have to be a realistic, you can kind of be expressive about it. So you can figure out what the lighter and darker shades are. And you could even do things like, maybe you really want to go, like maybe this patch of skin here is yellow and this one's just purple right off the bat. So you can really play with that kind of thing. Or maybe you want to manipulate the image, put it that way, image of yourself. Maybe you want to get an image of can't think of anything, a strawberry, a aardvark, a, what else, Joe? Come up with something. A coffee mug. Maybe you're going to transform your head into a coffee mug for your self-portrait, and somehow there's coffee spilled all over the table. So you really can kind of take it in a lot of different directions and then play with the color scheme. So experiment a little bit. Don't get too hung up about the proportions. I should be wider. I'm getting old, and a lot more wrinkles. I think I look younger in this. Anyway, don't get too hung up on that. And remember, you can also trace or use that grid thing to help you draw it out larger. So there's a lot of possibilities, okay? Have fun.